Ladies and gentlemen, this show is about pasta, but you're going to get an extra recipe on top of it. That's right, this gorgeous dish, I'm going to show you how to make it. Some ravioli. I'm going to teach you some other things to do with pasta, different shapes. Howdy folks, welcome to Texas Cooking Today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a Texas Cooking Today cooking tutorial. Now on these tutorials I try to get into a little of the history of a recipe. I try to teach the best and latest techniques available and to show you the best way to pull off any recipe. We get into methodology, everything when it comes to cooking. So folks, kick your heels up, relax, kick back, and let's get in the kitchen and get busy cooking. Come on. Today I'm going to make some pasta. Recently I was watching the Master Chef series, and I do this to kind of keep up with my ongoing education, keep up with what's going on and what's popular, what's not. And it really helps me in determining which direction I want to go on some dishes. Now recently they were down to I think 8 chefs, and I think of course now it's much lower than that, but anyway, I was watching the episode where they were at 8 chefs and they were doing a competition between 4 of them. One of them was going to leave. They were trying to make a pasta dish, and I watched as these young people struggled in making pasta. And I thought, oh no way. It should never be a struggle to make pasta. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you a formula for making good pasta. It's going to be a basic recipe. It's the baseline recipe for pasta and how to make it. And from there you can take that and kind of change it and twist it and work it and mold it to become yours. And I'll teach you methods to do that. I'm going to show you how this pasta recipe can be applied and how much work is involved, which is very little. There's a lot of videos out there that are teaching people to do all this kneading and other stuff. I'm going to show you something completely different today. It should not be difficult to make pasta, and if you're making it hard, there's no need in that. Stick with me. Today we're making pasta, and it's going to be good. Today we're going to be using some very basic ingredients. This is something that every household should have, so it should be easy for you to make pasta. You're going to need flour, salt, olive oil, and eggs. Very basic, nothing more than that. Don't make this difficult or complicated. Now, within the thinking of not making it complicated, you don't need fancy pasta rollers, okay? If you got one, fine, use it, enjoy the thing. But is that necessary? Nope, sure isn't. Today, I personally will be using the rolling pin, and you're going to see how easy it is to work your pasta with a rolling pin. You're also not going to see me do a lot of extra work like heavy kneading or any of that. I'm going to teach you how to get around all of that and produce a fantastic pasta in the process. Now guys, let's get busy mixing up our goodies because we got pasta to make. I have placed some of my flour in the middle, and I have all of my ingredients broken up to make 2 batches on this. So I'm going to be doing a couple of different things with my pasta, and I wanted to show you it's easier to make your pasta sheets in controlled amounts, and so that's what I'm going to do here. So I've started by placing flour in my bowl, and in the middle here I'm just going to kind of open it up. You hear they say, oh, make a well in the middle of your flour for your eggs. Well, that's exactly right. We're going to put our eggs right in here. There we go. Just as easy as that. This needs that pinch of salt, in other words about a ½ teaspoon of salt. It needs that dollop of olive oil, in other words 1 to 2 tablespoons, right there. Now I simply break my egg yolks, and folks, from there it's as simple as scramble those eggs, okay? Isn't that simple? A little mixing, work the flour in gently. The whole idea of making the well in the middle and working that flour in gently is to prevent lumps of flour in the dough. It's a time-honored tradition and it works, believe it or not. Now, of course, making this on a breadboard, on a wood board, is also tradition, and you don't see me adhering to that. So, another tradition is to knead the pasta. Well, guess what we're not going to do? We're not going to knead it. We're simply going to mix it, and we're going to rest it. Now, when it comes to making pasta, and you see so many people teaching, oh, you must knead the dough to develop the gluten. Well, I'll be straight up with you. If you're wanting to use your pasta immediately after making it, in other words, if you want to use this in the next 15 minutes, well, yeah, you're going to need to knead the dough. But in this case, I don't have a big time rush. I'm going to make the dough in advance. I'm then going to set it aside in a sealed place, free from air, and I'm going to let it do what's called autolyzing. Now, so you'll know, autolyzing is something that bakers do for bread. They produce a better quality bread and have to do less work by simply autolyzing. This was the technique of making bread for centuries before the electric mixer came along and changed things by kneading. Now the mixer is able to do that kneading electrically, and it speeds up the process of gluten development. So that's really the purpose of the kneading, is developing gluten, which is actually starting to happen. It's already starting to get kind of sticky. So it's working itself together really well now. All right? Now you've seen, I haven't gotten my hands in this. I haven't worked it yet. I'm about to, but it didn't take anything to get that, all right? Very simple mixing. Now I have a little extra flour here. I'm just going to gently flour my hands so that I can work my pasta without getting it totally stuck to me. I'm going to save my fork for my next batch. Now this is where I will do a little bit of light kneading, only enough to make sure everything is fully mixed. And right now this is sticky, okay? And it's absolutely beautiful. I don't have to do anything else than that. So this is ready for me to seal away in plastic. I'm just going to use Ziploc bags, press out the excess air, zip them closed, and let them rest. Now if you wish to roll that in a little bit of flour, it'll help to keep it from sticking to your plastic. Well, there they are. These are all fixed up now. I have them sealed in plastic, and they are just sitting here resting, both of them. And I'm going to give those about 40 minutes. All right, 30 to 45 minutes is what I tell most folks. I find 40 does a really good job. Now, why are we letting them rest? Okay, what's going on here? Why am I not kneading it? Other people tell you you have to knead it for it to work right. Okay, here's the thing. If you want to use that pasta really soon, like in the next 15 minutes, get busy kneading, okay? You're going to have to knead it to develop the gluten in order to make it work right. Otherwise, it won't roll out right. It'll be weak, it'll tear easy, that kind of thing. It's not going to work out well for you. You want your pasta to be resilient and durable, even though it is rolled thin. Again, developing gluten, let's go back in time a little bit and let's look at this from a bread maker's viewpoint. A long time ago, before there were electric mixers, bakers that made bread knew that if they kneaded the dough, they would be able to get busy rising it quickly. However, they learned that that's a lot of work, and if you're baking, let's say 30 to 50 loaves, wow, that's a lot of baking. Well, if you're baking that much bread, you don't have time to knead all of that. You'd have to hire so many people, it'd be ridiculous. So they did something else. They did an old method that works. And this is the secret, this is the old trick. It's called autolyzing. Autolyzing is where we mix all of the ingredients in bread making with the exception of the yeast. We simply make a dough that's without yeast, and allow that dough to rest. It just sits there for a while doing nothing, and an hour later we mix the yeast into it. The dough has autolyzed. All of the gluten is developed. We're now ready to rise it and get that good quality porous action inside of the bread that we're looking for. And that was because we allowed the elasticity of the bread to develop. That's what the gluten is. It's the gluey, sticky, elastic part that makes bread the way it is. It's the same way with pasta. That gluten has to develop. So setting your pasta or resting it is autolyzing. You're autolyzing that pasta so you don't have to knead it. All right? The gluten's developing now. We're just going to let time do what it does instead of using muscle. Now, a neat part about autolyzing, it gives you time to focus on what sauce you're going to put with that wonderful pasta. Something else I want to mention while I'm discussing this right now, the flour that we used. Now, you can do this with any kind of flour you want, except cake flour. Cake flour doesn't have enough gluten to make it work. All-purpose flour has just enough gluten to make an okay pasta. If you want to make that pasta a little bit stronger and more stretchy and sticky, then use bread flour, and that gives you the effect that semolina flour will give to your pasta. Now, you can make semolina pasta. All you have to do is substitute semolina for the flour as much as you want, but you need to be forewarned. Most home pasta recipes that use semolina, you're going to see are 50-50, 50% flour, 50% semolina. Through my experiments with pasta over the years, I learned the semolina by itself takes in water very, very slowly. It is extremely high in gluten, much more so even than bread flour is. And that's one of the reasons it gives pasta its wonderful, very good quality, like the pasta that you get from the store. It's very firm and strong. And that's due to the fact that they use 100% semolina flour. And it gives you that quality. Now, you can make that, but remember, your resting time increases. It gets longer. Also, it's a little bit harder to work it, all right? And you'll see what I mean. It fights you. Making the 50-50 mix between flour and semolina works really well. Those are your different items. Something I want to mention about semolina flour, when you purchase it, it's going to have a different texture than regular baking flour. It's kind of grainy. It feels somewhat like cornmeal, and it acts a lot like cornmeal in some ways. For instance, when I make bread, sometimes instead of using cornmeal on the pan to help the bread release, I will put semolina flour on the pan, and it gives the same release to the bread that the cornmeal would do on the bottom of it. It's really neat. It has a slightly different texture when you're making the pasta itself, so be prepared for that. Wanted to mention that so that when you get your semolina flour, you're not thrown back by what you see. Well, there you have it. It's now just time for us to wait, and I will be making the pasta in just a moment. I'm going to be making a big sheet. We're going to do some ravioli. I'm going to teach you how to make some different strips of pasta, how to do different things. It's not hard, and it's kind of fun. Once you start making pasta, you'll never stop. It's time for us to get the pasta out of the bag. Before I do that, though, I want to make sure my surface and my hands are ready for that, okay? So you want to flour your hands real well, and that makes sure, or helps to reduce, I should say, the sticking from the pasta. This, now that it has set up, is going to be much more agreeable to work with. Now here's the thing. Gluten is kind of weird. Once it has had the chance to develop and do what it needs to do and rests, it actually becomes easier to roll the pasta out even though it's more developed. When the gluten is freshly wet, it's very rubbery, and so this pasta will just shrink right back up if you try rolling it out. when it is freshly made. And that is the reason you would normally have to knead it for a good, 10 minutes at least. Well, we autolyzed, so wasn't that necessary. Now, if my pen catches it and pulls it up like it did just then, that tells me it's getting a little bit on the dry or wet side. So I just flip it over. I'm ready to start again. We're getting there. Like I said, use plenty of flour. Don't be afraid that you're using too much, because you won't be. And this time, see, it's starting to stick to my board a little bit. If that happens, use a straight scraper. There we go. And just loosen it up. And we'll flip it over. There we go. So my pasta right now is working very well for me. It's being very agreeable. But as I mentioned, we needed to roll a fairly substantial sheet. All right. I think it's getting back to where it's probably getting close to sticking. But if you'll notice, you can see some of the lines of the board underneath this. That means we're getting it nice and thin at this point, okay? It's getting to what it should be. We're almost where we need to be. More flour. There we are. Now, if you're wondering, if you've seen other people handling pasta and they tell you to fold it and fold it again and then roll it out, what they're doing is they're trying to produce real good square edges to work usually in a pasta machine. And when you're working with a pasta machine, that does make it a little bit nicer, I'll admit. But it isn't necessary. I've got a little tear up here. That's not really going to matter much for what I'm doing, but look at the size of pasta that we've made here. I want to square this up just a little bit so it's easier to handle for what we're about to do. So first thing, I'm going to make this side a little more straight. If you don't have a roller like this, a pasta cutter, which is what this is, you don't have to have one, okay? These just kind of make it a little easier, but they're not essential, all right? Not at all. There we go. This lesson is going to be about how we make our noodles, our flat noodles. And the first thing I want to do is to start by just folding this lower edge over just lightly. Okay? Hang on before I do that. I'm going to flour this again. Just like that. Let's turn him over and flour this side once more. Doesn't have to be heavy, and just lightly. There we go. We'll take this bottom edge and we'll fold it over just lightly. Just like so. And I want to do it again. But what I'm actually doing here is I'm rolling it. Okay? Right. Now as you do this, you're going to only take it to a certain point, and then you're just going to stop, all right? Just like that. Now let's look at this from a little different angle, okay? What I'm going to do to make my noodles, and you can do this for making all kinds of stuff, you know, your wide noodles or narrower noodles like fettuccine. So this will do almost any kind of flat noodle, even down to very, very narrow ones, okay? So what I want to do here, I'm going to start by cutting off this outside edge. Boom, just getting rid of it. Then I'm going to take my knife, and for the width of noodle that I want, I'm going to start cutting. Now if you notice, what I have sitting above my noodles there is a piece of uncut pasta. You're going to see how important that is here in just a moment. And if there is slight variation in your noodles, you know, it's not going to hurt a thing. All right? Remember, these are homemade noodles, not factory cut noodles. It's the real thing, okay? So a little imperfection is pretty much to be expected. Now folks, this is the reason we leave the strip across the top. Watch this. And grab it very gently and just lift and watch the noodles drop, okay? It's just as simple as that. Now, I started to tear up there a little bit, but what I normally like to do is fold this over after I get my noodles to drop, and then I simply cut the top right off of it, and boom, ladies and gentlemen, except for that one, we have our noodles ready to go right there. And the others that are stragglers, just give them a little help. There we go. That's not so hard to do, is it? I've got this beautiful fettuccine ready to get busy cooking up wonderful stuff. Now I mentioned to you that you can make all kinds of neat little shapes, all right? You can also make stuff like bow tie pasta. If you want to have a crinkled edge, you need to give it a crinkle cut, just like that, along those edges, just like that. But not so important. What is important is knowing how to shape it, and that's a simple pinch. That's 3 fingers, 1 to hold it down and 2 to push in, just like this. You see how it forms those 2 little lips? Push them together, and boom, you've got bow tie pasta. I'll admit that's not the best one I've ever made, but it is a bow tie pasta. Not hard at all. Let's move on to how to make raviolis. Now that's really cool. What I did here was start with a simple half of a small container of some ricotta cheese. Doesn't take a whole lot. And I took a fistful of baby spinach leaves, you know, the kind you get for making salads. Take those, wad them up, slice them up really nice and thin, because you want it to hide well in that little dumpling, okay? After that, just mix it all together really well. Don't forget to add a little bit of salt to it, and then you are ready to stuff those beautiful little dumplings. Time for ravioli. There we go. As I said, a sheet almost 2 feet in diameter. It's a very large sheet, guys, and it's quite thin at this point. It's just right, but it's not too thin. It's not going to break through, okay? I'm going to get rid of some of this excess flour and move right on to the next step. Once we have that dough rolled out, I'm going to fold it over so I get sort of a half moon shape. The reason I'm doing this is for the sole purpose of gaining a crease in my pasta. That crease line right there becomes a guideline for my work. Next, I want to take some water, and you can do this with your finger. I like to use a paintbrush that I bought just for making ravioli some years back. And it wasn't sold for that purpose, it's just regular old paintbrush. But I got a good quality one, so I would be able to clean it up and reuse it multiple times. So you see I'm painting stripes, and I want these stripes to be spaced about the size of my ravioli square, all right? So if you want your raviolis to be 2 inches square, these lines need to be centered at 2 inches apart, all right? So I'm only going to make a small number of ravioli today, but if you really try, I've been able to get an even 18 ravioli per sheet when I'm really working it to make plenty of food. Okay, first ravioli set right there. Okay, so those are the first two. 1, 2. Get my next one right there. That's 5 ravioli and 16. So very simple. Now, so you'll know what we're doing here is, once again, we are working with the gluten in that flour, where we are taking advantage of our gluten. By doing this, the gluten activates, and when I fold the ravioli, this piece, over the top of the other, it will stick to the wet lines because the gluten has been activated that way. So fill each of your squares with ravioli filling. You don't want too much, but at the same time you don't want it to be a minuscule amount. Okay, so I find if it's the size of a ping pong ball on this size of ravioli, it's too big. Okay, you need to make it a little bit smaller. A small jawbreaker is about the size. I'm going to fold my pasta back over onto itself, just like this. Oh, beautiful. There we go. Now, important part. I want to gently tap it down in between. Now, once I get that basic shape done, I go to cutting out what I don't need. Okay, so obviously I don't need what's on these edges. There we go. Now you can use your pasta cutter wheel to do this as well. That works really nice. You can do it with a knife or with the wheel, either way. Now the next thing you want to know about these cute little dumplings, you want to burp them, okay? So I'm going to very gently press the air out with my fingers, and then I'm going to tamp down on those edges. Now a lot of times when you're doing this, let me get a little more air there. There we go. Get that out. A lot of times when you're doing this tamping down, it will cause it to stick to the board. So if you just use your knife or your pasta knife, pastry knife, I should say, like this, either will work well. Okay, so there's how you make those wonderful little dumplings. It's not a hard thing to do. We can see our cheese through it. It's going to be some good ravioli. So for something wonderful to put over that ravioli, I've chosen to do a wonderful cream and cheese sauce, what some people call an Alfredo. And I'm going to put mushrooms in this one. It's going to be good. Now here's the way we're going to do this. I'm going to start with these mushrooms right here. We need to get some heat underneath this pan. So I'm going to bring the temperature up on this. These do not have to cook long at all, okay? They just have to cook a little bit because we don't want to put them into our sauce raw. Now while my pan is still good and hot, I need to go ahead and get some garlic right down in there. So that's exactly what I'm doing now. Get a little more oil there. Now, I don't have to really cook off this garlic just a whole lot. All I'm trying to do right now is make sure I get some good oil release from the garlic. So you see here how they have this light tan color developing on my garlic, and that is just right. It's only been a couple of minutes now, so I'm just going to pull this out. The flavors that I'm looking for are already in my oil, and I don't need the garlic itself anymore. So I have this beautiful flavored oil that I need to build on. Get my butter in there. So the next thing, while it's still good and fresh, get my cream in there. Now this is coming up in temperature. I'm getting a little bit of light steam off of it. So I'm going to work in my cheese. And I want this over a medium low. We're going to go ahead and get some pasta right down in there. These have had a few minutes to cook and they are now ready to go. So I'm going to simply pull them out of the water. I don't have to be any too neat about this. If I get a little of the pasta water, well, that's the reason I'm using the colander. There we go. A little olive oil. Just gently toss them. Okay, that's all you have to do. Those pasta right there, that ravioli is ready to be plated up, folks. It's ready to go. Now, when we were making our pasta today, the actual quantities that I laid out, that was 1 cup of flour to each 2 eggs. That would be 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil and 1/2 a teaspoon. Now, what I have ingredients for here is enough to make 2 batches, which would be 2 cups and 4 eggs. I find it easier to work this by making it 1 batch at a time, so that's the way I measure it out. Let's get this up on this plate. Now remember, when it comes to plating, something you have to remember, we eat with our eyes first, okay? If the plating is unattractive, then the whole dish is unattractive. So you need to kind of work on that plating a little bit. Right here. Let's very gently work it over the top of this. Isn't that beautiful? Let's get some of our mushrooms right over the top right there. Isn't that gorgeous? And a little bit of basil sprinkled down around over it. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Pasta 101. You know, the best part about pasta is getting to enjoy it after you make it. We have this beautiful, beautiful ravioli with a gorgeous Alfredo, special made Alfredo. We have mushrooms. We got some basil on there. We got all kinds of goodies. But what brings it all together? What makes that perfect little dumpling? Pasta. It's so simple. People frequently overwork making pasta. It's not hard. As you've seen, it's really simple. Please give it a try. Guys, thank you very much for watching this show. Thank you very much to my subscribers. I appreciate that so much, guys. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click the subscribe button, the bell icon also. That way you're notified with the new videos. It's every Thursday on my video releases. I've been going at this for a few years now. I'm committed. You're going to get good recipes. You're going to get great tutorials. And you're going to learn really neat stuff just like this each and every time. Thank you folks for watching and have a good day. There it is, folks. Thank you very much for watching Texas Cooking today. I appreciate that very much. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. And if you've enjoyed this video, I would appreciate you clicking the like button. If you'll check out my channel, you'll find out I've got a lot of recipes on there. A lot of fantastic tutorials, some good information for you. So folks, thank you very much for watching and, well, please have a good day. Bye-bye.